Alrighty guys, here we are, and it's time to learn a little bit about the ankle, how we go about achieving dorsiflexion, and some of the muscles and tissues on the back side of the shin that are going to influence our ability to bend our ankle, which is super important. So you can tell by this picture, first off, I'm not an artist, but I did my best, and I'm going to kind of walk you guys through this. So we have our femur here, patella. The main bone that is our shin bone is the tibia. I did not include the fibula in this photo. Underneath the tibia is going to be a very important bone. It's called the talus, which is basically the steering wheel of the foot. Just like when you turn a steering wheel left and right, it's going to influence the direction the car turns. Well, the talus, when it internally rotates or externally rotates, is going to drive pronation, which is internal rotation of the talus. Or if it externally rotates, it's going to drive supination, right? And those are the two things that happen in our foot. Now, I didn't include all the bones of the foot because there's a ton, but our heel bone sits underneath the talus, and that is going to be called the calcaneus in my world. In front of the talus is a bone called the navicular. In front of that is the metatarsals, and then we actually have the big toe itself. Now, when it comes to the ankle, one of the primary things that people are always trying to prove is the ankle's ability to bend, to be able to squat deep, which is called dorsiflexion. So dorsiflexion is going to be where we bend our knee. So you can see in this example, I have a slight bend in the knee. It's almost that 20-degree bend that we see running, but just picture the knees bending here. You can see the shin bone, which is the tibia, is falling forward almost like a drawbridge lowering down, and the distance between the top of the foot and the shin bone, the tibia, is getting smaller, right? Which is what we call the closing angle, or in our stretching, we call it the short side. Now, if that's what happens when my foot is in contact with the ground, which is called closed chain, if I simply just lift my toe up or my toes to my knee, that would be open chain. But the same thing's happening where the distance between the tibia and the top of the foot is getting smaller, so that is considered the closing angle. We need to be able to dorsiflex to get into a deep squat, to put length and load into the backside tissues, because if this is the closing angle, that means all the stuff on the back is part of the opening angle, which is what is going to be receiving a stretch. It's going to be going under length, so that is going to be a connective tissue thing, and it's going to be the long side. So when we dorsiflex, the front side's getting shorter, the back side's getting longer, and if we don't have the ability to dorsiflex, we're not going to be able to achieve length on the back side. And it's not just going to be the tibia that is responsible for dorsiflexing, because what we've got to realize is specifically the talus has to get out of the way. So the foot has to pronate. So if this bone, the talus, does not go backwards and get out of the way, so it's got to scoot out of the way, the shin gets jammed and stuck right here. So this bone actually has to move backwards very slightly. It's very subtle. Or else what happens is when the shin goes to fall forward this way, or you go to do a deep squat, we will get a block, jam, or pinch, or we'll get stopped in the front side of the ankle. So that's where people will commonly say, yeah, I don't feel like I'm really getting stopped by a stretch. I feel like I'm just stuck, stopped, pinched, jammed, or I can't get further here. So the talus is important. So the talus has to glide back, which is going to allow this part of the foot to pronate. So we can't just think about the ankle dorsiflexing in a closed chain without thinking about pronation. Now, if it's an open chain, so if I simply just lift my toes up right there, sorry, I know that was weird. If I simply just lift my toes up, then the ability to pronate does not matter. But think about everything we care about, which is running, squatting, jumping, all that is in contact with the ground. So what we've got is some key players in terms of muscles here. And the reason why I drew the femur is because the first muscle, you can see, I poorly drew this, in red is the calves. Now, the calves are going to be a biarticulate muscle, which means that they attach to two bones and cross two joints. So they're going to start and attach at the femur, which is super important to know, and they're going to run all the way down and attach to the back side of the heel bone, and they're going to blend into, it's hard to see, but I have an orange triangle here. That's the Achilles tendon. So the calves blend into the Achilles tendon and attach right at the backside of the calcaneus. But the reason why it's important to note that they cross the femur is because that means the femur, and when that bone moves, whether that's through flexion or extension, is going to influence the calves. So we'll see how that comes up in a second. Now, I didn't really want to talk about the hamstrings, but it's important to note that the hamstrings are also a biarticulate muscle. They start back here, and they cross the hip, and they also cross the knee joint. So they come down to the tibia, and they almost do the gladiator-like strength and honor, where they almost spiral around the calves. And that is why whenever we've got calf, shin issues, whenever we've got Achilles issues, it's so important that we train the hamstring super hard, especially when it comes to knee flexion hamstring exercises, because whenever we do knee flexion hamstring, it's going to pull, grab, load, and send force through the calf. So that's why it's super important. Vice versa. If you have a hamstring injury, it's so important to do calf training because of that cross-bridge connect between the femur and the tibia. So that's important to know, that the calves actually cross the knee joint. Unlike in the green here, so you can see the green is right beneath and underneath. So the calves is kind of level one of the three layers of the backside of the tibia and shin bone. And why that's important to know is because if we can't get length out of these guys, we're not going to be able to achieve dorsiflexion. Now remember, we said that if the foot can't pronate and the talus can't go back, then that's an issue in itself. But we do know if we have got tightness restriction or we can't get to length here, that there's no way we're going to fall forward. So obviously the calves, moving the femur is going to influence the stretch on the calves. Our second layer, so the layer that's one deeper, so this is getting closer to the tibia, one deeper, so below the calves is going to sit my favorite muscle, which is the soleus, right? Soleus is kind of that level 2, which deals with around 6 to 8 times body weight force. The calves is only dealing with that 2 to 3 times. So remember, the soleus is the real superhero of running because it contributes over 50% of vertical force. So the soleus sits deeper, but the soleus, if you notice here, attaches to the tibia. It does not cross the knee joint. So that's why changing the angle of the femur doesn't affect the soleus to the same degree. It will only be changing the position of the tibia. Now the soleus also blends into the Achilles and attaches out the calcaneus too. So the calves and Achilles and soleus all blend together, and they actually spiral, and they do like a spiral staircase down to the back of the heel bone. Cool, so that's kind of layer number 2. Now, layer number 3 is actually what most people forget about when it comes to just dorsiflexion, running, the stuff on the backside of the shin. Layer 3 is going to be the deep flexors of the toes, which is going to be the FHL, flexor, and then FDL. So FHL is going to attach the big toe specifically. It's going to run all the way under the feet, right on the outside of the ankle bone, and then it's going to actually sit deeper to the soleus, and it's going to go right against that tibia bone, which is super important. And then the FDL is going to do the same thing. It's going to just attach to the digits, which is the 4 smaller toes. And this is going to be the deepest layer, which is going to be our kind of level 3. So the 3 layers of the backside of the shin are going to be the calves is closest to the surface. Soleus is 1 layer deeper, and then the deep flexors, which is the FHL, flexor hallucis longus, and then flexor digitoris longus, which are going to run underneath the foot, attached there, is going to be the deepest layer on the backside. Okay, that's super important to know. And the reason is because depending on what's restricted or what's tight, we need a different solution based on which level we're experiencing restriction at, okay? So if we're experiencing restriction and tightness and we can't get to length, if the calves can't achieve length, well, that means we need to influence the femur. So that's where for level 1, to really bias the calves, we need to be doing straight knee calf stretches. So if I lock out my knee and I have a straight knee, because I'm going to lock out the knee so the femur would so I'd go into extension, that's going to pull on that attachment point, and that's going to create the stretch, right? And since when I lock out my knee or I extend my knee, since the soleus isn't influenced by the femur, it's going to, like I said, bias more of the calf. So if you have restrictions in your calves, you'll be very limited when you lock out your knee and do that type of stretching. So if we want to influence the top layer or the calves, we're going to do straight knee calf stretches. Okay, super important to know. But for a lot of people, they actually might be fairly unrestricted. A lot of people might not have that much restriction when they do a straight knee calf stretch. They might have some neurological tension for other reasons, or maybe they're just doing a lot of mileage. But if for some reason we are still struggling to, so this is a little bit about problem solving, right? If I can't dorsiflex my ankle, we have to investigate which layer and level is not going to length. Now, it could be all three. It could be one of the three. It could be two of the three. It could be three of the three. And like I said, there's other stuff that could be going on where we might not have the talus going backwards. We might not have good midfoot motion. There's so much more that can happen in the foot. But for simplicity's sake, for the backside of the shin, are we restricted at level 1, 2, and 3? Are we restricted at level 1 and 3? This is where we're going to search and destroy. So level 2, so if I want to bias the soleus, I need to do bent knee stretches. Now, most people are just going to say bent knee calf stretches. It's okay. Technically, when we're bending the knee, we're trying to focus on the soleus. But if you say bent knee calf stretch, it's okay. You're nothing wrong. So now when I bend my knee, right, I decrease tension on that outer layer. So instead of straightening where I'm going to put tension onto the outer layer, I'm going to decrease that, which is going to allow me to focus more on the second layer, which is the soleus, right? So that is where bending the knee is going to allow us the slack we need to go deeper into the posterior shin. So if let's say you're doing a straight knee stretch and not much restriction, not many problems, you're not really getting stopped. All of a sudden you bend your knee and it is a significant decrease, or you run into a significant increase in tension. Now all of a sudden you know, okay, my soleus is more restrictive than my calf, or vice versa, right? Say you do bent knee stretches and there's not much there, but when you lock out your femur and extend your knee and you do a straight knee stretch, it all of a sudden is tight, it's nervy, it's okay. Well, now you realize your calf might have neurological tension or mechanical tightness, okay? And that's what we've discussed in other videos. But here's the real hidden culprit that I see with a lot of people. I tend to see a lot of people do the first two. So tons of people do straight calf stretches, bent knee. But the third one is, so for level 3, well, to influence the flexors, right, we have to influence the toes. So now we need to take the strategy of level 2. So we still need to bend knee, right? So we still need to bend the knee, because if the knee is straight, the calf is going to go under length and tension, and we won't be able to get deeper. Okay, so then we take the bent knee from level 2, but then we need to add one more step. So then we need to dorsiflex the toes, because that is now going to that's going to pull that tissue up, which is going to then allow us to stretch deep. So this is where we would go into what looks like the soleus stretch, but now I would picture these are my toes. If I stretch my toes up against like a foam roller, a lacrosse ball, they make sometimes specialized stretchers for this. Then all of a sudden, now we're biasing the deep flexors. So let's say we check level 1, 2, and they're not too terrible, right? And then all of a sudden, we put the toes into dorsiflexion and we try to rock forward and get that shin to stretch. And then all of a sudden, bam, you hit a dead block. Now all of a sudden you realize that you've been limited by your deepest layer, level 3. And a lot of times, and for most people across joints, the deepest layer of tissue often is the most neglected. It's often going to cause the most problems. And the reason why the flexors really are going to limit dorsiflexion is because, remember how when we bend our shin forward, so when we're squatting and our shin tends to fall forward, okay, which is dorsiflexion, we said the talus needs to sneak back this way. Well, if this stuff right here is really tight and does not allow length, when the talus goes to go back, it can't get it. This stuff is going to stop it. So then what happens is I can't get my ankle. Okay, this is called the talocrural joint. So that's the talo. So right, the talus crural joint. Then I get jammed here. Sorry, I always have like a lisp when I say that. Okay, and then what happens is I can't achieve true dorsiflexion. So then I probably have to pronate more than I would need to fake range of motion at the ankle. So you'll see a lot of people who look like they've got good dorsiflexion and their foot pronates or is heavily pronated. And then all of a sudden when you go to dorsiflex their toes up, they look like they've never stretched their calves, soleus, and stuff before, because what happens is now instead of stealing range of motion from their midfoot, they're having to truly attack their true limitation, which is at this joint, which is because those flexors never have been getting challenged under length and under load. And that's the important of training your deep flexors. But also, the important thing to realize is we don't pick favorites. We should be doing work for the level, for the calves, for the soleus, and for the deep flexors. And that comes in forms of length and strength. So we're always chasing length, range of motion, and capacity. But now you see how the tibialis, right? The tibialis actually, so when this is happening, so when we're squatting, when we bend our knee and go into a squat and we dorsiflex, or when we're running and our knee bends and our shin falls forward, the tibialis isn't really actively like contracting, because when this happens, actually when we dorsiflex in a squat, we should be relaxing this stuff in the front so that gravity can do its work. But gravity should be pronating your foot, right? It's gravity's job to pronate the foot because there's actually no muscles that attach to the talus. So the flexors that I just described sit on the back side of the talus. They don't attach to it. So there's no muscular attachments to the talus. So the way that bone operates is through gravity, force, and pressure. So gravity is going to pronate the foot if my foot is moving well, and then the shin will fall forward. But the problem is, if these guys can't get me to length, I'm not going to be able to get there. So dorsiflexion, this is the closing angle. So when you go to do a calf stretch or a knee stretch, you should feel a stretch in length in the connective tissue on the backside. If you feel like 50% stretch here, but then you feel 50% jam, block, pinch, or bone on bone here, that's a sign that you're not getting enough length in the backside, and then you need to go to each one of these layers and explore and train. Now, there's always going to be one of the layers that generally sticks out in terms of biggest bang for your buck, but the answer is, why not do all three, right? So hopefully this is helpful. There's a ton of other stuff when it comes to the foot, because the foot is very complex, right? There's so many bones in the foot, and the forefoot, which is the front of the foot, has to do different stuff than the back. But quick recap, the calves is the outermost layer. It attaches to the femur and the heel bone. So straight knee stuff is going to influence more of the calves. Bent knee stuff is going to put some slack on the calves so we can get to the soleus. The soleus does not cross the knee, but is a powerhouse and does far more work than the calves when we run. The deep stuff to the soleus is going to be the deep flexors, which are the toe flexors, which runs underneath, around underneath the ankle bone. So the ankle bone would be right here, excuse me. So the best way to think of the talus, so this is the talus, which sits underneath your shin bone. I want you to picture my skull is the talus, and then your ankle bone, right? So your ankle bone right here, that's your medial and lateral malleolus. So ready? I want you to picture that I'm wearing Beats by Dre headphones. So I've got the headphones around my head. This is your medial, and this is your lateral malleolus, and the talus is my skull. So when I turn the talus in and out, you see how it influences what direction my shin and ankle are rotating, which is going to be pronation, supination, internal, external rotation. Okay, so this is going to, and then we can start to see. So you can even mess around with this in your own stretching. So start off and see if you've got tension in the calf. The answer is you could have a ton of tension. And then remember, our two types of tension. We have brain tension and then mechanical tension. Check with straight leg, check with a bent knee, and then check with a bent knee with the dorsiflex toes. I find most people, it's the deeper stuff that they haven't explored as much of, okay? So that is a short intro and kind of a mini deep dive into how we improve ankle mobility, specifically dorsiflexion, and some anatomy on the backside of the shin. I hope you guys like it.